Competent and dangerous. Why dangerous? Because it's the alternative to being weak, and weak is not good. The people who shoot up the high schools, they're weak. How is it good to be dangerous? Because it makes you formidable, and life is a very difficult process. It's not for you. You're not prepared for it unless you can be dangerous. You said that a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. How should people become more dangerous? Becoming more articulate is definitely, I would say that's the primary array of weapons. So, I mean, physical prowess is something, and physical confidence that comes along with that as well. The same thing is replicated at the level of the ability to communicate and to think. That's way broader field of battle and opportunity. So this is one thing that isn't taught well, especially to boys. It's more important to teach it to boys, I would say, because they're more skeptical of such an educational enterprise in general. Generally speaking, partly because they're less obedient, partly because they're less agreeable. That's particularly true for disagreeable boys, and agreeable boys get higher grades independent of their IQ and their academic achievement because they're easier to deal with. So what do you tell disagreeable boys? There's nothing that makes you more formidable than verbal competence, than being able to articulate, be able to think, to marshal your arguments, right? It's a battlefield metaphor to get everything in order and get all your information. And that's part of why rap artists are so popular, especially among disaffected young men, black and white alike, because they're unbelievably articulate, like they have this incredible verbal prowess. It's unbelievably attractive. You know, it's associated with the genuine, artistic, and redemptive activity, often focusing on something that's approximately the voice of the underclass, let's say, but a powerful voice. It's interesting to see how many young white guys identify with that. Well, if you're a young man, feel alienated from your place as a rightful place of the proper kingdom. I mean, that's an existential truism for everyone, particularly for every young man, because he is an outsider in many ways. He's young and juvenile and not very highly valued, and then is in some sense hurt by the inadequacies of the current king, the current culture, and it is easily turned against it because of that. And that's the machinations of the evil uncle. That's the King Arthur story. That's the story of Horus and Osiris. It's an ancient story. It's the story of Sauron, and it's there all the time. And you see that in rap music. In hip-hop, all of that alienation is given an unarticulated voice in an artistic sense. And that's an excellent example of the power of verbal facility. And that's the root of, let's say, marketing education to young men. It's like you want to take your rightful place in the kingdom. It's like, get your tongue straight, man. Get it under control in the highest possible sense. So we went to a comedy club in New York, the Comedy Cellar. It's a great comedy club, and the last comic was an English guy, and he was not particularly physically prepossessing, and he made a lot of jokes about that, and it was quite funny. And then he divided the audience into 5 sections and asked each section to toss up a topic. And they were like random topics like the Kennedy assassination and electric lighting before 1890. Those were 2 of the topics, and the other 3 were just as diverse. And then he put on some beats. He did about an 8-minute rap. Every verse rhymed, and he tied the whole thing together at the end all spontaneously. It was unbelievable. And that's logos, man. That's the redemptive power of the logos right there. The magic word. The sacred word. It's just manifesting itself on stage. There's something very impressive, something about that does feel dangerous as well, and not in it. I need to be concerned, and this should be contaminated and walled, but in a way that you think that person has so much competence. It's flowing out of them, and you almost feel competent by being around them. So, you certainly feel competent by appreciating it. Yep, right. Because it speaks to the part of you that is capable of appreciating such things. You think, wow, that's something that's an amazing display. That's an amazing thing to see. Amazing, right. A very interesting word. Amazing. And you're trapped. And you're trapped by the charisma of that. And that charisma, that's not anything. That's a signal of something redemptive occurring that accounts for virtually all of the attraction of hip-hop and rap. It's the articulated voice of the struggling, but worthy underclass. I suppose that's a good way of putting it, but those who are alienated from their rightful place. And so that verbal prowess is one of the ways they struggle up towards the light in it. And that's a good example of that, of having that danger under control. Because it's a dark genre in many ways, right? There's a real undercurrent and era of violence that surrounds that in its culture, like the punk movement in the UK back in the late 70s. Same sort of thing. That capacity to express that poetically, in a compelling manner. Anger is energy. And John Lydon, man, he could channel that like almost no one I've ever seen. He'd get that anger built up inside. And then it was completely under control, and he expressed it in his music, and he's captivating. Unbelievably charismatic, and I liked his music. That raw anger in the music but it was in the bloody music, it wasn't some random riot. You know, he transmuted that into something. You can argue about the poetic merits of punk rock, although I don't think you should. What someone's doing is they're refining it, they're distilling it down, and then they're directing it. So I went to a powerlifting competition a couple of years ago. There's this one guy there lifting. He holds a bunch of records in the squat, and he's the normal working class guy from a normal working class town on the outskirts of Newcastle. And watching that man warm up is something else. He's got a sacred playlist. He never listens to the songs apart from when he's about to step onto the lifting platform. He's got these headphones on and he's just walking up and down in the same way that you'd see a bull, ready to go out, ready to go and chase something. And he steps out on stage and the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. You're watching this guy channel his rage into strength. That's the god of war. You go to war with words and you think that's what young men should be taught. It's beneficial for people to hear that they should make themselves competent and dangerous and take their proper place in the world.